24 years ago, we were staring into the abyss. We said never again, and yet there we were.
This is it then.
We speak to the players and the coaches who were there 24 years ago.
On that season, there was an atmosphere in the ground where it's like, well, no, everybody has to come together here because the consequences of what could happen just don't even bear thinking about.
Michael Ball as far away as possible.
I think I might have been the last person to touch the ball. I just remember just kicking it as far as I can. It might have gone into the main stand or somewhere, probably just sliced it. I just wanted the boot of the ball as far away from our goal as possible.
But it was a great feeling once, once your blood pressure had calmed down a little bit, you felt, didn't feel too bad. It took about an hour to sink in, but it was a great feeling, to know you'd survived.
And watched on again, this time as fans.
And because there's so much emotion involved, everybody gets caught up in it. But I think that was the biggest thing that stuck out for me, is that it can't be understated, the role that the fans played in that. And
I understand what the players are going through, the reactions of the players because of the fans. Look, if the fans down tools this season, we were gone. That was it. The fans were fantastic. That made the players stand up and be counted. And then the players ended up doing a job at the end of the day, but that's all down to the fans.
We're also joined by the bomber, Tony Bellew, to give us his thoughts 24 years apart on Everton's relegation fights.
He steps over the barrier. That vision will stay with me forever. There's thousands, and it felt like hundreds of thousands of people were on that pitch, because it's just a sea of Evertonians singing, screaming, jumping. And they've got their hands in the air, and he just puts his hands up like that. And at that point, I'm just thinking, this is nuts, mate. This is absolutely nuts. He's singing Everton's songs, and yeah.
24 years on, never again.
Hello and welcome to Across the Park podcast. We are looking at the mini-series, the 24 years since the previous relegation battle, and I'm joined by ex-Toffee Gareth Farrelly. He's been on the show before, but obviously he's back now for a YouTube show. How are you doing, Gareth? You all right?
Yeah, very well. Nice to be back.
Good. Yeah, thanks for having us back.
I don't know whether that means I did something good or I did something bad, so let's see how we get on.
Let's see how we get on. Let's see how the YouTube audience like it. The podcast didn't go too bad. Let's see how this one goes. Well, nice one for joining us. Really appreciate it.
No, pleasure. Good to see you.
Yeah, and as I say, we're just looking at obviously being at the 97-98 closing day of the season and avoiding relegation. Obviously, you scored the important goal that day as well. So we're just looking back. Basically, we've had a few guests on talk about how you felt on that day and going into that day and the season and whatever else, and compare it a little bit to this season.
I don't know a lot of the other guests you've had on, obviously, yet, but obviously typecast on the basis that you become more popular when the word relegation gets mentioned, whereas it's not something anybody likes to kind of associate themselves with.
Yeah. You got a new lease of life because of that, so it's all good.
Yeah, it's like St. Patrick's Day and Valentine's Day. There's only specific dates where you're in any way popular.
Yeah, well, we've had a couple on so far from the team. I won't say who it is because I don't know which orders it's going out in, but we've had a couple on from the team so far. Give me a clue. Yeah, he's a left back, the guy we had on last week. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
All right, that makes it a bit easier.
Does it? Okay. I don't know what that means, but all right, fair enough.
No, Ballie's one of the good ones, so no problems there.
Good. Well, I'm going to get into that later. I've got a question about that type, going along that type of line later, if that's all right with you. Well, I'll start off as obviously that was your first season. I've been coming in as like a 21-year-old. I won't go into the whole season and sign and whatever else. But when we obviously do this podcast last summer, when we were having to talk about, predictions for the season and stuff, we sort of said between ourselves, we're going to struggle this season looking around at the squad we've got. Even the money we paid, we thought, we haven't really got it this season. We haven't got the characters in the squad or the quality to do very well. I don't think we were expecting a relegation battle, but we certainly knew we would struggle. Obviously, coming into Everton when you did, 21-year-old, what was your feelings about looking around the squad? Were you just made up to be there as a your first? Because you've been brought in as a first teamer, if I remember rightly, and sort of you were expected to play. Were you just buzzing to be there, or was you looking around thinking we're going to struggle?
Firstly, how perceptive of you guys. So kudos to you, because again, I don't think there was many people that had predicted that last season would be such a struggle, given the investment and given all of the noise around it. But my story is easier in regards to the fact that I didn't give any consideration to any of that, because I was an Evertonian. I just wanted to play for Everton.
Yeah.
So people will talk now about analysis and doing SWOT assessments on which is the right club and which is the club that's going to suit them, and positionally, where are they up to with regards to the development. So yeah, I was a young 21-year-old, but I knew I was going to leave Aston Villa when I did. And as soon as there was interest from Everton, I wasn't going to sign for anybody else. Because it was Howard Kendall who'd come back for his third stint as manager. But obviously the overriding point for me was the fact that I wanted to play for Everton. So it was really, really easy in that respect. So I didn't give any consideration to the fact that 2 of the 3 previous seasons, Everton had been struggling. It's not something as a player you kind of give a lot of thought to, I would say, because you do feel that you'll add value anyway. It was a difficult kind of baptism and situation for me, because despite having been a fan, I think it is something totally different when you come to Everton to kind of develop an understanding live as to the intensity of playing for the club and all of the challenges that brings. And whilst I'm getting older now, like life moves on and you move on to different kind of pastures, the reality is that you can kind of see that and recognize it in some of the players that probably come to Everton now, is that whilst there's a cursory understanding that you're signing for a big club, I don't really think that some of them understand that level of intensity or the expectation that comes with that. I think it can be more difficult for people who actually come from the city because they've grown up with it, and it brings a different type of pressure and demand. But for me, I didn't think about it. I just wanted to get the kit on. I wanted to play for Everton. But there was a secondary piece that I stepped into what was an incredibly challenging situation, having come from an environment at Aston Villa where you were kind of challenging for trophies or at the higher part of the Premier League. So it was a different type of challenge, but again, part of learning.
So going on from that, what stage then, or was there a stage where it switched from being a boy of blue playing for Everton, delighted to be there, to maybe feeling, as you say, it was a tough time, and I don't think we particularly started the season well. It wasn't like we went well. We started playing well and then we dropped off. I think it was a difficult season from the get-go. Did it change at some point where it was like it changed from, as I say, that Evertonian playing for Everton to a bit of a pressure environment and a needing to win?
Yeah, I think there was always pressure. I think, and again, you look back now, God, we're talking about 24 years ago, but I think the point was there was a degree of pressure because you wanted to do well. And sometimes in wanting to do well, you're not as present, or people talk about being in the zone, or like different elements that come with that. And when you're a young player who's not got the experience of being involved, in a struggling team or in a successful team, and you're trying to find your way, it can be a little bit more difficult. I think in a lot of teams, when you see young players coming through, to get the most out of them, you'll see them either come in for a few games and then be taken out, or used differently as a means of helping them develop. Whereas Everton was a difficult situation because you were thrown in, like you said, you were a first team player, and there was expectation there. And I think that over the course of a season, there's good games, bad games, peaks in performance and difficult games. But I always say this when I speak to people, that like people measure bravery in different ways. And sometimes for fans, there'll be someone who kicks an opposing player up in the air, and fans will celebrate that person and think, well, hang on, this is somebody that's totally committed to the cause. Whereas I was a footballer, used to playing in a team that played good football. So you measured yourself in different ways. You measured yourself by your contribution on the ball. You measured yourself by creating opportunities for others. You measure yourself by having, attempts at goals and scoring goals and things like that. And those things didn't happen early on, but it didn't happen for the team. But yet you kind of carry that pressure and responsibility for yourself. And I'm always fascinated with that, because my personality, I would have been very, very into analysis. I'm a perfectionist. So I didn't need somebody to tell me you were crap on Saturday, or we lost by 2 or 3 goals. I invariably knew all of those things anyway. And it becomes an additional pressure then, because you're thinking, well, wait, 1 in 3 weeks, or I haven't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I either hit the corner flag, I hit the back of the stand, or I made goalkeeper show reels, but I haven't scored yet, or I've been involved in a great move that hasn't resulted in a goal. So the pass that you made at a given time then doesn't get any attention. So there's a whole host of different challenges in that. And I think as you get older, you can recognize it. Whereas when you're young and living it, you're just sometimes totally removed from it. And it's difficult to perform at your best in that. And I think that now you watch games, you go to see I still see a lot of football, and I still watch a lot of football, and you can kind of identify that in others. And it's kind of a different conversation, because equally when you're living it, you're totally absorbed by that. And again, it's unforgiving now because of the level of coverage and exposure that there's not a lot of respite, is there? So I think there's huge credit to the manager and the players, because they went through an incredible challenge themselves this year. And whilst nobody wants to talk about nearly being relegated, they had a positive outcome in relation to that.
Yeah, you're right. And then the scrutiny now is, compared to even in 97, 98, is unbelievable. And there's players, I mean, season ticket holder Everton, there's players who we wouldn't have expected to stand up this season who did. I'm talking about Iwobi, you're talking about bravery, and someone like him who, he's not a fan's favourite. He wasn't a fan's favourite at the start of the season, and, he was a big price tag and all that. He was the player who was getting on the ball, and I'd be having the bravery to get on the ball and trying to make things happen. Whereas other players, more experienced players, you would have expected to stand head and shoulders above the others, sort of hid and for want of a better way, sort of shit out a little bit in those big games. So it's definitely
but to be honest with you, Bryce, it becomes really interesting, because you see, it's no different to a work environment, right? It's no different to any kind of group, even people that play whatever level of football you play at. You'll have your dressing room. Do you know what I mean? You'll have the funny one, the smart one. You know what I mean? The skillful one, the lazy one. Those dynamics within the dressing room are always the same. And sometimes there's a media perception of people that is not actually the true reflection of what those people in the dressing room see. And that's always the kind of the disconnect, because as I said earlier, there'll be a perception that, oh, this person bleeds blue, or these are the people that are going to lead us to safety, but it's not necessarily those that do stand up. So I think, again, that's one of the interesting dynamics about, in some ways, not having that same level of emotion or being involved, is that you can kind of look and objectively assess all of those things. And you hear what people are saying, like we talk about, like Anthony Gordon had an incredible season for a young player. And I think he'll only improve on the back of the pressure and the intensity he had to deal with. So again, there's different people present themselves that at the start of the season may not have been in your contemplation as to who would be kind of the standouts over the course of a season.
Yeah, that's it. And that type of situation, like you say, it brings out different personalities and different people, different sides of personalities and people that you would never expected it. What was it like? Talk about the pressure and whatever else. I know what it's like. I've been a season ticket holder for good stuff for years and years, so I know what it's like. I don't know what it's like to play good, so I know what the feeling is in Goodison when it gets anxious and when things aren't going well. I think this season, I think it got to a point after Benitez got sacked and Lampard come in that the fans were just like, we're going to have to get behind this. There's no point anymore of moaning about it or going into the stadium anxious or whatever else. And you may not have seen the scenes with the bringing the coaches in and clapping them, and the atmosphere was brilliant. It's not always like that. Was that a hindrance for not you personally, but as a team going in, having to getting wins and going out in Goodison and the pitches are condensed and it's that type of atmosphere and it's anxious. How did you find it, or was it the opposite for you? Or for the team, was it going to Goodison a bit of relief because you had the fans behind you? How did it work for you in that season?
God, I'll try and break down those 8 questions.
Sorry.
No. So listen, so the start point on that is, I was with one of my friends recently and we had a joke and we used to say, in some cases that can be an added pressure, and that playing away would be a release, because at least if you're getting slaughtered, it's invariably the away fans, right? Yeah. I think as Evertonians, there's a predisposition to moan anyway. You know what I mean? Nobody can deal with expectation. But I think what was fascinating last season was there was a coming together, which I think kind of happened in '98, possibly later. And there's a recognition that irrespective of what's been going on in the club, the noise around it and that intensity that we spoke about earlier is that we have to get behind the club, and the club means more than, you know, any of the other issues that are going on. And I think that was the most noticeable thing for me, is that fundamentally everybody talks about symbols, gestures, slogans, you know, the fans, the club, there's a name, all of this stuff. Whereas the part the fans played in Everton staying in the Premier League is undoubted. And it was incredible to see, because as you've just said, when the fan base came together, they're the people that drove the agenda. They're the people that set the standard, and everybody bought into that then. And there's an incredible energy around that. So it's not cliched, but like that's the reality. And I think for other clubs and for other people, there's a template in that, because it's like everybody's division, you know, and frustrations are cast aside because there was a greater good. And that greater good, whilst it was not something that anybody would have wanted to contemplate, which was Everton dropping out of the Premier League, it surpassed all else. So fans will obviously have played a part. You know, every club, every fan loves their club. Every fan would say that they play an incredible part in their team's success or failure. But the reality is, for the last couple of months of the season with regards to Everton, I don't think anybody's kind of experienced similar. I would say walking into Goodison in '98, the atmosphere was similar. People will say comparable to what it was, you know, towards the end of the season. And it's like it was amazing, and it was amazing to witness. But there's always this part of human nature in life now that, oh, next year, every year's better than last year, and this is the greatest year of all time. And because there's so much emotion involved, everybody gets caught up in it. But I think that was the biggest thing that stuck out for me, is that it can't be understated the role that the fans played in that. And it was brilliant to see, because all of the other, you know, petty protests or grievances or issues, which haven't gone away and rightly shouldn't go away, but I think the fans are enjoying possibly a little lull now before they have to get going again. So I think they were amazing, and I think it was really, really telling.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there is a bit of, even though we've just stayed up last game or second to last game of the season or whatever it is.
It was the second last game.
Second to last this time. Yeah. We were. There's optimism there, which is strange, because there is optimism.
Evertonians we don't do optimism very well.
No,
but I think the reality after '98 was, I met with Howard Kendall the week after we stayed up, and it was just me and him met at Belfield. And like my kind of comment to him was, it was like everybody had the ability to kind of take a breath after everything that had gone on. And the first comment was like, this can never happen Everton again. This can never happen again. Now, unfortunately, we're 24 years on. God rest his soul, he's not with us anymore. But the reality is that it has happened, and it was too close, and it shouldn't have happened. But it'll be interesting to see what happens now. But you talk about optimism, but I speak of caution, because I think the fans can't step back now from that central role that they've taken. And I think that they have to be involved to a comparative level moving forward, and they have to organise and be clever and be strategic about how they have their voice heard.
Yeah. You don't want to burst the bubble too much, but you still need to remember that there's issues there and bring them out when it's right to bring them out. I suppose what I wouldn't like is just to pick those issues that are still there, that were around at Christmas with the protest. I wouldn't like us just to go straight into that again pre-season and put a dampers on it.
No. But the truth is that comes from a frustration, doesn't it? And the reality to these things is that a demise doesn't happen overnight. So it's a frustration that's been building for quite a period of time. And as a fan, sometimes you don't know where the best outlet is to be able to express that. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a shift. There was a shift because irrespective of those issues, the most important thing was the club. And I think they presented themselves in a really, really good way, because you talk about the amazing atmospheres, but the reality through the season is we also saw the counter side to that. Yeah. Some of the games at Goodison, I'd never experienced such a toxic atmosphere as that. So like you say, you had to go through the bad stuff to get to the positive outcome. And thankfully it was a positive outcome, because the potential consequences of relegation were beyond anybody's worst, contemplation. So it was a really, really positive thing.
So you talked there about after the end of that season, you and Howard Kendall had a moment together. As a player, what's that like? Then you've survived relegation. We're talking about optimism, whatever else, and maybe caution. You survived relegation. Have you got half a mind to think it's going to be like that again, or I'm determined it's not going to be like that again, or looking around at the squad thinking, well, he needs to go and he needs to go, and what's the feeling going back into pre-season after something like that?
Well, you've got your individual and collective feelings. So your individual one is that you've come through an incredibly challenging time yourself. So for me to have had a difficult season, but then have an outcome like that was unbelievable. So you think that, not that you've built up a credit, if you like, but the fact is, because of what's happened, there's going to be a bit more freedom, and it's going to be a little bit easier compared to the level of pressure and scrutiny you were on before. But collectively, that's not really your decision. Obviously, you have your own ideas about players, teammates, and different things like that. But that's not your role. That obviously sits with the manager, and it's shifted now with regards to the sporting director and the manager working together. So, in my case, it's far easier to turn around and say, "Well, manager Howard got sacked the week after that." Mm-hmm. So they brought a new manager in, and for me, that new manager within a very short space of time said you can leave. So my experience of that whole kind of event is totally different.
Yeah.
I played 8 minutes football. I played 8 minutes football for Everton after that goal.
Yeah. I know that's the big difference with you, I suppose, with that time is the manager left straight away, whereas we had a manager who's obviously now who's just coming in, now he's got a chance to implement what he wants to implement, basically.
And given how well he's done, I think he's got a bit of collateral. So people will be willing to give him a little bit of time, and that is born out of him not being the manager before that, but then obviously there's a degree of perceived success with regard to the fact that they stayed up. Yeah.
He's the guy who got us out of it, isn't he, rather than put us into it? And I think that's the difference, isn't it, sometimes?
Yeah, but statistically it becomes interesting because when he took the job, they were 16th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, finished 17th. But you're talking about emotion, aren't you? You're talking about the drama, you're talking about the pressure, you're talking about all of the different challenges that came with that situation. And I think in that regard, he acquitted himself incredibly well and was able to forge a bond with the fans that not many others have done in such a short space of time.
I think that would have been on his job, on his initial objectives as well. Get the fans on board, get them connected. And I think being on the job description and having the ability and the intelligence to be able to do it is not necessarily the same thing, is it? So I think he did it, and I think that happened within defeats as much as some of the wins. So I think it was a positive thing. Yeah, some of his comments after the defeats were what Evertonians wanted to hear, if you like. Some of the things he said was we were all feeling the same way, so it was refreshing to hear someone reflect exactly what we were thinking as well.
And I think that's such a vital part of management now, isn't it? Is being able to kind of relate. Yeah.
Okay. So just going back, you touched on a little bit earlier, but looking at that 97-98 season, and I've listened to a couple of ex-players on podcasts, and not necessarily our own, and they've been in relegation battles, and they spoke about looking around the dressing room and thinking, he's on board, I can trust him, I can rely on him, I can't rely on him. Was that feeling there, or was the divisions within the dressing room at that point, and is that part of the reason maybe why we weren't successful?
Oh, I think, to be honest, I think it's really, really difficult, Pricey, to talk about division. I think, again, you're back to this challenge because for some people that have not encountered, a situation like that, it's new. You've got your own individual, you know what I mean, ego that people are looking to kind of protect themselves, or like you've said, characters, different people react to stressful situations in different ways. And in a struggling team, there's a chance statistically that those players aren't performing to the best of their ability, and that can be for a host of different reasons. So you've got the individual performance or individual who's obviously in some cases looking after himself, but then you've got the collective, which is, as you've said, the people that you look to. But for me, that has always been interesting because the ones you look to may not necessarily be the ones that the fans believe are those people that are the ones that are pulling in the same direction as them. And again, that always fascinates me, because characters are made up of, like, obviously different traits, but also a team is made up of different traits. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes people read too much into those things, but I think that going back then, there was still strong characters in that dressing room, as there probably is now. But without being in that dressing room, you don't really know that. You might be given a snippet, or again, having a good social media profile doesn't necessarily mean that you're that person in that dressing room. It comes back to perception again.
And that's what it's like from a fan when you see a player who's playing and you wonder why he's on the pitch, and obviously he's doing something off the pitch that's earns him a place on it. And it happens all the time, doesn't it? When you see players and he's giving, new manager comes in and gives the same player a chance who maybe didn't have a chance before, and there must be a reason why he's doing it. It must be, first of all, maybe he hasn't got enough signings, but secondly, he's performing in training, he's got a good attitude, and he's showing a willing to be on the pitch.
Yeah, and it comes back to that bravery piece again, because like, so people will talk about there's a different pressure challenging for trophies. Do you know what I mean? So again, you've got your big players who step up in the big games, and those players who can produce that money ball or produce that quality that separate the elite. You know what I mean? But obviously, relegation is no less a pressure situation. In some cases, it can be even more so, because what's at stake. And as I say, having been in and around Liverpool at that time, like, it's tangible. You know what I mean? And I think in this particular circumstance, it was turned into a positive, wasn't it? Because, like you say, I don't think the players looked upon the fans being there an hour before, or the bus coming into the ground. I don't think they looked upon that as a pressure. I think they were able to feed off the energy of that, and it became a positive. And again, that comes back to that atmosphere again, which is, who would not want to step out in that atmosphere when everybody's pulling in the same direction? And I think, going back from my point of view, is that was a pressure that you relished. Do you know what I mean? Because again, the rubbish that had passed before was not important anymore. It was about outcome, and it was about trying to achieve that positive outcome. And then, like, I'm only here talking to you 24 years on, Brycey, because of something minuscule that took place in 1998, but yet it was a big thing, and as an Evertonian, it was an even bigger thing. So the point is, everybody will have their story related to that, and I'm sure a couple of generations on, that's going to be the same now, isn't it? Given the intensity of that last 6 weeks of the season. That's why I think there's probably some Evertonians still sleeping now, trying to recover from what they went through for the last 6 weeks of the season. So thankfully, as the fixtures came out, Everton are in the Premier League for next year.
Yeah, I just hope I'm not talking to you another 24 years on, saying, Gareth, remember 48 years on when you've done.
Well, it's getting harder for me to remember, Pricey. I laugh at myself. It's like you're retired. It's like, I do well to remember what I did 2 days ago, never mind 24 years ago.
And it's obviously a big. I mean, sure, it's a big moment for you, but big moment for Evertonians. We've obviously had a career since then. You're 22 at that point, or whatever old you was. You've had a long career since then. So to bring memories back for you, it must be hard. But I was going to actually ask you what you remember of the build up. You're just talking there about the coaching stuff this year. What do you remember the build up, or do you remember anything of the build up and the team talk and any inspirational words, anything like that?
There's not war stories associated with that. I think there was a recognition of the seriousness of what was at stake. So I don't think there needed to be massive team talks or Braveheart speeches. Like, I think everybody knew, and I think you do your work in preparation. For us, at that time, it was similar, because I say to people now, we stayed in Parkgate the night before the game. We were all together, which was unusual for home games.
Yeah.
But from the bus into Goodison, there was people out on the street already. There was flags out on the street, similar to what people saw this time. You got to the ground, there was a completely different atmosphere. So you knew, you didn't need people to tell you, because the reality is, like, again, slightly different situation, because there was still 2 games, 3 games, 4 games left, where your destiny was in your own hands, if you like. So the stories end up writing themselves, don't they? That's why everybody loves football, because everybody has a story, everybody has a memory. So I don't think, before the game, there was people stood up giving Braveheart speeches with regards to what was needed and who we were doing it for. I think there was a level of professionalism around that, but to walk out, and I think sometimes we're all guilty, because you're not really present, you're not really in the moment, because again, it goes back to what I was saying about maturity, or youth being wasted on the young, or fear, being able to really, really express yourselves. But there was an atmosphere that day that you just thought, oh wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have been amazing if we didn't get a positive outcome. But the point is that it all built towards creating that.
Yeah.
So it was something that I'm still incredibly humble to have been a part of. But in the reality of a footballing career, it was gone.
Because that's it.
And that's the reality. Yeah. And that's how ruthless football can be. And I'm sure it'll be no different next season, because we can talk about all of the beautiful things, but the reality is if Everton have good start, bad start, the Evertonians will be there to let them know what their thoughts are. So that's it. It's part of being a fan.
Yeah. Well, any credit in the bank, it doesn't last long, does it, for the next season?
No, of course.
No. So just we're looking at half an hour here. So what was your I was just going to ask, this year, if it felt, if there's something about staying up relegation. It's not winning the trophy, but there's a sense of it's a celebration. Obviously, everyone's on the pitch. It's a relief as well, though.
Yeah, I love that one, Pricey. It's like the best worst outcome.
Yeah, you feel like you've achieved something without actually achieving it, basically.
Yeah, but I think that's when you balance it out against what the potential consequences of not doing it are. Yeah. And also when you see the other clubs that have gone down now, you know what their reality is.
Yeah, and that's what I was just basically going to ask you. Coming in from there, does it in the dressing room after the game? Does it feel like you've achieved something, or is because you have achieved something because you've kept Everton in the Premier League, and there's all those jobs that could have been lost, I suppose, if you go down or anything like that. So, is there a celebratory element to it in the changing room, or is it just a relief we've got through it?
I don't think as many players will have looked at a direct economic assessment of the consequences of relegation.
No,
so from a starting point, no, I'm not trying to make light of it, but no, I think it's different emotions for different people. I think like there's players will have walked in and probably felt a massive sense of relief. There's players that will have had a realization and thought this club is far too big to be in a situation like that. There'll be other players similar to 98 who'll have thought, right, I've come through an incredibly challenging time. I've got some credit in the bank, and next year I'm going to kick on. There's a whole host of those things, no different to kind of what a fan's emotion would be. Do you know what I mean? But the difference is that those players have the ability to affect that. Fans can do their part and played an incredible part in it, but fundamentally, you still live or die by what happens on the pitch, don't you?
Yeah. So you did go out on the last then?
No. I was exhausted. Yeah. Some people went out and had the best night of their lives. For me, it was one of them where you went home and you just thought, oh my God, emotionally, I'm just absolutely exhausted. And still, it's kind of sinking in the significance of what you've done. Like I say, again, in each story writing itself, that was my first goal at Goodison, my only goal at Goodison. So it was like everybody has a different kind of memory. You look at Dominic Calvert-Lewin, had a challenging season by his own standards, but yet had an incredible outcome. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's lots of players, Demary Gray, you know what I mean, who had a brilliant start and had some injuries and then difficult through the season, ended up providing the assists. You've got the game going 2-0 down. You talk about all of those emotions that people will continue to write about for years now. So each person's story is their own.
It is. We'll hit 30 minutes there, guys. I don't mind if we leave it there. But look, thanks very much for your time, and we always appreciate ex-players.
No. Listen, great to see you.
Yeah, thanks. It was nice to go down there and get your views on that. Cheers, mate, and thanks for everyone for listening and watching. And catch you soon.
Take care.